Captain Ryland sat alone in the cockpit of his old starship, staring at the endless stretch of stars outside the glass. The hum of the engine was steady, but every few hours it coughed with a warning beep, reminding him that his ship had seen better days. He knew the risks of traveling so far into uncharted space, but his dream was stronger than fear. Ryland had heard whispers in space stations, in dusty markets, and in the corner tables of alien taverns. Whispers about a world of treasure guarded by a powerful alien king. Some said the king had vaults filled with gems that shone brighter than suns. Others said he had devices that could bend time or heal wounds instantly. A few even claimed he had the secret of immortality itself. Most people dismissed the stories as legends, but Ryland was not like most people. He had always believed that where there was rumor, there was truth buried underneath, and so he left the comfort of familiar trade routes, charting his course toward the violet star cluster where the world of Droskar was said to lie. Days turned into weeks as he traveled through unknown regions. He dodged asteroid belts that spun like silver storms. He passed through a field of broken ships, their remains silent reminders of explorers who had never made it back. Strange signals sometimes echoed through his communication system, voices speaking in languages he did not know, warning him to turn around. But Ryland never turned back. His heart was set on treasure, and his ambition kept him moving forward. One day, as he was adjusting his navigation, a strange glow appeared outside his window. At first, he thought it was a star, but the glow kept getting larger until it covered his entire view. It was a planet unlike any he had ever seen. The world shimmered with colors that danced between violet and silver. Clouds twisted across its surface like ribbons of light, and mountains sparkled as if carved from pure crystal. Rivers of liquid brightness flowed like molten glass, catching the glow of the distant sun. It was both beautiful and intimidating, and Ryland felt his breath catch in his chest. This must be it, he whispered to himself. The world of treasure. Guided by the faint signals on his console, he descended through the glowing atmosphere. The ship rattled and shook as energy storms swirled around him, but the craft held together. When he finally broke through the clouds, the surface of the planet unfolded before him. Great cities of stone and crystal stretched across valleys, glowing towers rising into the sky. The architecture was unlike anything human. It was sharp yet graceful, ancient yet alive, as if the buildings themselves were breathing. He landed in a wide courtyard surrounded by tall pillars shaped like spirals. Dozens of armored guards awaited him, their eyes glowing with faint blue light. They were tall, with silver skin that shimmered in the sun, and their armor looked like liquid metal molded to their forms. Though they held no weapons in their hands, Ryland sensed that each one was dangerous enough to defeat an army. As he stepped down from his ship, a silence filled the courtyard. The guards did not move until one of them lifted a hand. Then, in perfect unison, they parted to reveal a long path that led toward a great hall. The doors of the hall were massive, carved with symbols that pulsed with soft light. Ryland straightened his jacket, trying to hide his nerves. He had dealt with aliens before, but never ones as strange and regal as these. Still, he reminded himself why he had come. He wanted treasure. He wanted fortune that would make his name known across galaxies. 2 guards escorted him inside. The hall was vast, its ceiling so high it disappeared into a mist of golden light. The floor was made of polished stone that reflected like glass. Tall windows let in beams of violet sunlight, and banners of shimmering fabric hung from the walls. At the far end of the hall, upon a throne of crystal and metal, sat the king of Droskar. The king was unlike any being Ryland had ever seen. His skin glowed faintly as if stars lived beneath it. His eyes were deep pools of silver, and his presence filled the entire hall with a quiet strength. He wore robes woven with threads of light, and a crown that seemed to float just above his head. He was not just a ruler. He was a being of power, of wisdom, of age that stretched beyond centuries. The king studied Ryland carefully, and for a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy but not hostile. It was as if the king was measuring the weight of the human soul. Finally, his voice echoed across the hall, deep and calm. A human. Rare to see one travel so far. Tell me, traveler, why have you come to my world? Ryland swallowed, then lifted his chin. His voice was steady, though his heart raced. I have heard stories of treasure hidden here. I came to seek it. Riches, gems, artifacts, whatever you choose to give, I will prove myself worthy. The hall remained silent for a heartbeat, then another. The guards did not move. The king's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sparkled, amusement perhaps, or curiosity. You speak with courage, the king said at last. Most who come here beg for life, not riches, and yet you stand before me, bold and unshaken. Rylan nodded, his confidence growing. I have faced storms and dangers to reach this place. I do not fear trial. I seek only the treasure your world guards. The king leaned forward slightly on his throne. Treasure, yes, I understand the desire. All beings seek it in one form or another. But tell me, human, do you know what treasure truly is? Rylan frowned. He thought of gold, gems, starships, power. Treasure is wealth, he answered. Something that can change a man's life forever. The king's lips curved into a faint smile. Perhaps, or perhaps you are wrong. You came searching for what shines in the hand, but I wonder if you are ready to receive what shines in the heart. Rylan blinked in confusion. What do you mean? The king did not answer directly. Instead, he raised a hand and the hall filled with a soft light. From behind the throne, 3 figures stepped forward. They were tall and graceful, with features both alien and familiar. Their eyes glowed like starlight, and their presence seemed to change the very air around them. These, the king said slowly, his voice carrying through the hall, are my daughters. Rylan's eyes widened in shock. This was not what he had expected. He had come for treasure, gold, gems, artifacts. Instead, he was being shown 3 living beings. The thought made no sense to him, and yet the king's tone was calm, deliberate, as if this was the answer to the quest Rylan had begun. You came seeking treasure, the king continued, but treasure is not always what you think. Sometimes it is not found in vaults or chests, but in lives that shape destiny. Rylan's heart pounded as he stared at the 3 daughters, each of them watching him with quiet curiosity. He had no words, no understanding. This was only the beginning of something he could not yet grasp. The king's eyes gleamed as he spoke once more. You will learn, human, for the gift you came to claim has already been given. And with those words, part 1 of Rylan's journey began. Captain Rylan stood frozen in the great hall of crystal light. His heart still raced from the king's words and his mind spun in confusion. He had expected treasure, chests of jewels, vaults of glowing gems, or devices that could make him powerful beyond measure. Instead, before him stood 3 daughters of the alien king. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. Their appearance carried both familiarity and strangeness, as though the universe had painted beauty with brushes no human hand could hold. Each one had silver-threaded hair that shimmered in the light of the hall, and their eyes glowed softly, like the reflection of stars on water. They were graceful in their movements, and the space around them seemed to hum with energy, as though they carried hidden powers within. The eldest daughter stepped forward first. Her name, the king said, was Soraya. She bowed her head slightly, her expression calm and thoughtful. Her eyes, deeper than oceans, seemed to look not at Rylan but through him, as if she could see the layers of his past and the threads of his future. This is Soraya, the king explained. She sees what others cannot. She reads the patterns of time, the paths not yet taken. Wisdom flows through her, and she guides those who walk with her. Soraya's voice was soft yet strong enough to fill the hall without effort. You are far from your world, Captain Rylan. You left seeking one kind of treasure, but another has found you. The road ahead will not be easy, but it will be true. Her words unsettled Rylan. He had not told her his name. How had she known? He opened his mouth to ask, but before he could speak, the second daughter moved forward. She was called Lyra. Her eyes were brighter than Soraya's, glowing with warmth, and when she smiled, the very air in the hall felt lighter. She carried a presence that calmed Rylan's restless heart, as though her very existence sang with harmony. Lyra is gifted in song, the king said. Her voice can calm storms, heal sorrow, and bring peace where there is none. She holds the power to bend emotion and steady the spirit. Lyra's voice when she spoke was like music woven into words. Do not be troubled, traveler. Your heart is restless because it expected gold and jewels, but peace is also treasure, and you will learn that it is rarer than all riches. Rylan shifted uncomfortably. He was not used to such words, not used to people who spoke in riddles. His life had been simple: seek, find, claim. Now he felt as though he had walked into a story larger than himself. Finally, the youngest daughter stepped forward. Her name was Elira. She was smaller in stature, and her eyes carried curiosity. Instead of wisdom or calm, unlike her sisters, she seemed restless, eager to explore everything around her. Her gaze darted from Ryland's ship to his clothes, to his hands, and back to his eyes. Elira, the king said with quiet pride, is unlike her sisters. She carries the power of adaptation. She learns swiftly, faster than any mind I have seen. Whatever she faces, she grows, changes, and overcomes. Where others stumble, she rises. Elira tilted her head, studying Ryland like a puzzle. Her voice was clear and bright. You are human. I have never seen a human before. Your thoughts are loud, your steps heavy, but your heart is brave. I like brave things. Ryland blinked. He did not know whether to laugh or frown. He had traveled light years for treasure, yet here he was being studied by 3 daughters of an alien king, each speaking as though they already knew him better than he knew himself. At last, Ryland turned toward the king. I do not understand, he said carefully. I came seeking treasure, riches that could change my life. Instead, you show me your daughters. What does this mean? Are you mocking me? The king's eyes gleamed, but his tone remained calm. No, human. I do not mock you. You asked for treasure, and I gave it. These 3 are my gift to you. They will walk with you, and through them you will find treasures beyond what your hands can hold. Ryland's brow furrowed. You cannot mean this. They are your daughters, not objects to give away. The king's expression softened. Do not mistake my gift. They are not possessions. They are companions. They chose this path as much as I did. Their strength will shape you, and your courage will shape them. Together you will face trials greater than gold or jewels could ever buy. Ryland felt the weight of the king's words. A part of him wanted to protest. He had come for riches, not responsibility. Yet another part of him, deep inside, felt a strange stirring. The 3 daughters were not ordinary beings. There was power in them, a kind of treasure that he could not measure but could not deny. He looked at Soraya, whose calm eyes seemed to already know his hesitation. He looked at Lyra, whose presence steadied his racing thoughts. And he looked at Elira, whose eager curiosity reminded him of his younger self when he first dreamed of exploring the stars. Before he could answer, the king rose from his throne. The hall grew silent as his voice echoed. Captain Ryland of Earth, you stand at the crossing of paths. You may choose to leave now, to return to your world empty-handed but alive, or you may accept my gift and carry with you not gold but destiny. Choose carefully, for the path you take will echo across galaxies. The weight of choice pressed heavily on Ryland's chest. He thought of his journey, of the dangers he had faced, of the whispers of treasure that had led him here. Walking away would mean failure, but accepting this gift meant stepping into something far more uncertain than he had planned. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. His ship was old, his supplies were low, and his heart was tired of chasing riches that always slipped through his fingers. Maybe, just maybe, this was the treasure he had been seeking all along, though he had not known it. When he opened his eyes, he met the king's gaze. I will accept your gift, he said, his voice steady. I do not yet understand it, but I will accept. The king nodded once slowly, as though he had expected this answer all along. The hall brightened, and the daughters stepped closer to Ryland, each one bowing their head in acknowledgement. Then it is done, the king declared. You are bound by choice, not by chains. Walk together, learn together, and discover what treasure truly means. The hall fell silent once more, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was alive, filled with possibility. Ryland glanced at his new companions. Soraya's calm gaze promised guidance. Lyra's warm presence promised peace. Elira's curious smile promised adventure. For the first time in his long journey, he felt not the hunger of greed, but the spark of something deeper. As he left the hall with the daughters at his side, Ryland realized his quest had only just begun. He had not found treasure in the form he expected, but perhaps what he had found would prove to be far greater. And so began a new chapter in his journey, one not written by gold, but by destiny. The morning sky of Droskar shimmered with ribbons of violet and gold as Captain Ryland stepped out of the grand hall. Behind him, the doors of crystal closed with a quiet hum, leaving him standing in the vast courtyard with the 3 daughters of the king. His mind was still heavy with questions, but there was no turning back. He had accepted the king's gift, and now he had to walk the path set before him. Soraya, Lyra, and Elira stood at his side. They seemed calm, as if they had always known this moment would come. Rylan felt uncertain. He had never traveled with anyone but himself. Companions meant responsibility, and responsibility often meant weakness. Yet when he glanced at the three daughters, he did not see weakness. He saw something he could not yet name. Soraya was the first to speak. "The king gave us to you not as treasures to be kept, but as companions to be trusted. Together we will face the trials of this land. Only then will you begin to see what treasure truly means." Rylan frowned. "Trials? What kind of trials?" Soraya's calm eyes met his. "The land itself will test you. Droskar does not open its heart to those who seek with greed. It demands proof of courage, wisdom, and spirit. These trials will not be simple, but they will prepare you for what lies ahead." Before Rylan could answer, Elira clapped her hands with excitement. "Good, I like trials. Trials mean adventure, and adventure means learning. Let us go." She skipped a step forward, her eyes shining as though she could not wait to begin. Lyra smiled gently. "We will walk with you, Captain. Do not fear. When the storm rises, my voice will calm it." Rylan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. He was not sure what to expect, but there was no point in staying in the courtyard forever. With a reluctant nod, he said, "Fine. Lead the way." The Forest of Living Light. Their journey began in the Forest of Living Light, a vast stretch of towering trees that glowed softly, their branches alive with energy. The ground was covered in moss that pulsed with faint light, and strange creatures darted between the trunks, leaving trails of sparkles behind them. It was unlike anything Rylan had ever seen, beautiful but unsettling. As they walked deeper, the light around them shifted, turning brighter, then dimmer, as if the forest itself was breathing. At first, Rylan thought it was harmless, but soon he realized the paths were changing. The trees moved, rearranging themselves when no one was looking. What had once been a clear trail became a maze. "We are being tested," Soraya said softly. She closed her eyes, her hands lightly touching the glowing bark of a tree. "The forest bends to confuse us. It will not let us pass unless we find its rhythm." Rylan groaned. "A shifting forest? This is impossible." But Soraya opened her eyes, calm as ever. "Not impossible. The forest moves in patterns. Watch closely, and the way forward will reveal itself." Rylan was skeptical, but as Soraya guided them, he began to notice what she meant. The trees did not move randomly. They shifted with a hidden rhythm, like a song he could not hear, but she could. With her guidance, they moved carefully, timing their steps with the forest's breathing. Hours later, the trees parted, revealing an open glade bathed in soft light. Rylan let out a long breath of relief. "We made it," Soraya gave a small smile. "Wisdom is the first key. The river of crystal flow." The next trial awaited them at the river of crystal flow. The water was not like any river Rylan had seen. It was liquid crystal, shining and sharp, flowing with dangerous speed. The current roared, and shards of light leapt into the air like sparks. There was no bridge, no way across, and the river stretched endlessly in both directions. "We cannot cross this," Rylan muttered. "One step in that and we'll be cut to pieces." Lyra stepped forward, her expression calm. "The river is wild because it has no harmony, but all things can be soothed." She closed her eyes and began to sing. Her voice was soft at first, like a breeze brushing over water. Slowly the sound grew stronger, weaving into the roar of the current. Rylan watched in awe as the river responded. The sharp shards softened, the wild current slowed, and the glowing surface became smooth as glass. Lyra opened her eyes and smiled. "Now it is safe." Rylan blinked, unable to hide his amazement. You calmed a river." Lyra shook her head gently. "I did not change it. I reminded it of peace. Even storms can remember silence." Together they walked across the river, the crystal surface holding them steady under Lyra's song. When they reached the other side, Rylan looked back at the glowing water and felt something stir in his chest. This was no ordinary journey. The desert of endless storms. Days later, they entered the desert of endless storms. The land stretched endlessly, covered in sand that shimmered like glass under the burning sun. But it was not the heat that made it dangerous. Storms of energy swept across the desert without warning, tearing through the sand like claws of lightning. Ryland struggled to keep moving. The storms rose suddenly, blinding him with light and sound. His old ship's equipment could not have survived such a place. Here survival seemed hopeless, but Elira was different. Instead of shrinking from the storms, she studied them with sharp eyes. Each time the energy struck, she moved quicker, adjusting her steps, learning the pattern. When the lightning twisted, she twisted with it. When the sand roared, she ducked and shielded herself. Her movements grew smoother, faster, as though she was dancing with the storm. "Watch her," Soraya told Rylan. "She adapts. She learns. The desert cannot defeat her." Rylan forced himself to copy Elira's movements. At first he stumbled, clumsy and slow. But Elira laughed and showed him again. "No, not like that. Step here, then move like this. Good, faster now. You're learning." Together, with Elira guiding him, they crossed the desert. Each storm that struck grew weaker, as if the desert itself grew tired of testing them. At last they reached the far side, where the air was calm and the sky clear. Rylan collapsed to his knees, exhausted but alive. He looked at Elira, who was grinning proudly. "You did well," she said. For the first time, Rylan laughed. A genuine laugh, free of greed or frustration. "You're not bad yourself." The realization that night, as they camped under the stars of Droskar, Rylan sat apart from the daughters, staring at the flames of their small fire. He thought about everything they had faced, the forest, the river, the desert. Each time, one of the daughters had saved them. Soraya's wisdom, Lyra's song, Elira's adaptability. He had expected to be the hero of his own journey, the one who conquered and claimed the treasure. Instead, he had been guided, supported, and even saved by them. A strange thought entered his mind. Perhaps he was not the one carrying them, but the one being carried. Soraya's calm voice broke the silence. She sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the stars. "You are thinking too hard," Rylan gave a short laugh. "Maybe. I thought I came here to find treasure. Now I am not even sure what I've found." "You have found truth," Soraya said. "Treasure is not always gold. Sometimes it is wisdom. Sometimes it is peace. Sometimes it is the strength to rise when storms try to break you." Rylan looked at her, then at Lyra and Elira, who were resting nearby. Slowly he nodded. Maybe you're right." For the first time since leaving Earth, Rylan felt the hunger of greed fade from his heart. In its place grew something different, something quieter but stronger. It was not the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. The stars of Droskar's sky glowed brighter than usual when Captain Rylan and the three daughters set out again. They had passed the forest that shifted like a dream, the river of crystal that roared like a beast, and the desert storms that struck without mercy. Each trial had tested them, and each time the daughters had shown their strength. Rylan felt different now. He was no longer a lone wanderer chasing glittering dreams. He was part of something larger, though he did not yet understand what. For days they traveled across strange valleys where the ground hummed with hidden energy. Mountains shaped like jagged teeth rose in the distance, and beyond them, Rylan could see flashes of light striking the clouds. The daughters walked with him, silent but steady, as if they too sensed what lay ahead. Finally, Soraya stopped. She raised her hand, and her calm voice carried through the cool air. "This is the last trial. Beyond these mountains lies the Chamber of Eternity, but it is guarded by the great beast of Droskar. None can pass unless they face it." Rylan narrowed his eyes at the storm flashing above the peaks. "A beast? After everything we've faced, now we fight a monster?" Soraya's gaze did not waver. "Not just a monster. The beast is the shadow of desire itself. It feeds on greed, on fear, on ambition twisted too far. Many have come seeking treasure, but the beast grows stronger with every soul that falls to its hunger. If you face it with greed, it will consume you." Rylan's chest tightened. The words struck deep. He had come here for treasure, for riches that would make his name echo across the stars. If this beast truly fed on greed, then he was already in danger. Lyra placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Do not fear. Where there is shadow, there can also be light. Together we can overcome." Elira's eyes sparkled with excitement rather than dread. "I want to see it. I want to learn how it moves, how it strikes. Then we will find the way to stop it." Rylan forced a small smile. He admired their courage. "All right then. Let's finish this." The beast awakens. They climbed the jagged mountains, each step harder than the last. The air grew heavy and the sky darkened until the stars vanished. The storm above swirled endlessly, lightning flashing in shapes that looked almost alive. At last they reached a vast plateau carved into the mountain's heart. In the center stood a gate of black stone, towering higher than any building Rylan had seen. Strange symbols pulsed faintly across its surface. Before he could study it, the ground trembled. A deep roar shook the air, and from the shadows of the gate, the beast emerged. It was immense, larger than Rylan's ship, its body shifting like smoke and fire bound into shape. Its eyes glowed with burning hunger, and its voice was not words but 1,000 whispers echoing at once. Rylan staggered back as the sound filled his head. The whispers spoke of riches, power, endless wealth and glory. They promised everything he had ever wanted. The more he listened, the heavier his heart grew, as if invisible chains were pulling him toward the beast. "This is it," Soraya said firmly. Her eyes narrowed, glowing faintly. "It knows your desires. Do not let them control you." The beast roared again, and its form shifted into mountains of gold, rivers of gems, vaults of shining crowns. Rylan's eyes widened. For a moment he saw himself standing on a throne of treasure, his name shouted across galaxies. His heart burned with longing. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "It's not real." But the temptation was strong. His legs trembled, his will faltered. The beast fed on his weakness, growing larger, its form towering higher as the illusions gleamed brighter. The daughter's strength, Soraya, stepped forward first. Her voice was calm, steady as stone. "I see the pattern. It rises with greed and it falls with truth." She raised her hand and her eyes glowed brighter. In her vision, she saw the moment when the beast's power wavered, the gap between its illusions. "There," she whispered. "That is when it can be struck." Lyra followed, her voice rising like a song against the whispers. Her melody cut through the storm of promises, soft and steady. The beast roared, trying to drown her out, but her song grew stronger, weaving light into the air. Rylan felt the chains of greed loosen around his heart. The visions of golden power dimmed. Alira was already moving. Her eyes locked onto the beast, studying every motion, every strike of its shadowy claws. She leapt aside as it swung, rolled under its arm, and rose again. With each move, she grew faster, sharper, as though she had fought it 100 times before. "I see it," she shouted. "It hesitates when the illusions break. That is when we must strike together." Rylan's breath came hard. His heart still fought against the pull of greed, but the daughter's strength gave him hope. He gripped the edge of a broken stone, forcing his eyes away from the visions. "Then let's end this." The battle of will the beast roared, sending waves of shadow crashing across the plateau. Rylan raised his arm to shield himself, stumbling under the force, but Soraya guided him. "Now, move left," she cried, and he obeyed, dodging the beast's strike just in time. Lyra's song rose higher, steadying his heart. The whispers of riches grew faint, replaced by the sound of her voice. He felt lighter, stronger, as though a weight he had carried for years was lifting away. Alira leapt onto the beast's back, her hands glowing as she struck its shifting form. The beast howled, its body flickering like broken fire. "It can be hurt," she shouted. Rylan's courage surged. He grabbed a fallen shard of crystal from the ground. It pulsed faintly as though it was alive, waiting for his will. With a roar of his own, he charged forward. The beast struck, but this time Rylan did not falter. He dodged, guided by Soraya's foresight. He held steady, strengthened by Lyra's song. He struck true, driven by Alira's courage. The shard pierced the beast's form and light exploded across the plateau. The whispers shattered, fading into silence. The beast let out one final roar before collapsing into smoke, then vanishing into the storm above. The plateau grew still. The storm faded and the gate of black stone began to glow. The chamber of eternity breathless, Rylan stood with the daughters at his side. The gate opened slowly, revealing a chamber of endless stars. Inside, the walls glowed with maps of galaxies, entire worlds drawn in light. It was not gold, not gems, not crowns. It was knowledge. Soraya's eyes softened. "This is the true treasure. The map of uncharted galaxies. The path to new worlds, new life, new hope." Rylan stared in awe. His heart, once hungry for riches, now beat with wonder. The treasure was not for one man to hoard. It was a gift for all who sought discovery. The king's voice echoed faintly through the chamber, though he was not present. "Now you see, human, treasure is not what shines in your hand. It is what opens doors for generations. You faced greed and overcame it. You are worthy of this gift." Rylan swallowed hard. For the first time in his life, he felt no hunger for wealth, no desire for glory. He only felt purpose. The daughters stood beside him, and he knew he would not walk this path alone. The revelation, as they left the chamber, the daughters smiling at his side, Rylan understood what the king had meant. Treasure was not measured in riches, but in companions who stood beside you, in wisdom that guided you, in courage that lifted you when you fell. He looked at Soraya, Lyra and Elira, each of them radiant in their own way, and felt a quiet certainty. This was the treasure he had been given. And though the beast was gone, Rylan knew the real journey was only beginning. For now he carried not just a map of stars, but the trust of companions who would walk with him into the unknown. The chamber of stars faded behind them as Captain Rylan and the three daughters stepped back onto the plateau. The mountains of Droskar stood tall, but now the storm had passed, leaving the sky clear and wide. For the first time since he had arrived, Rylan felt the world breathe calmly around him. The daughters stood close to him, their eyes reflecting the starlight. Soraya looked calm, her wisdom shining through her quiet smile. Lyra hummed a gentle tune, her song carrying peace into the silence. Elira paced near the edge, her energy restless, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Rylan placed his hand over his chest, where the shard of crystal still glowed faintly. It was a reminder of the beast they had faced and the illusion of wealth he had nearly fallen to. But more than that, it was a reminder of the strength that had saved him, not his own, but the daughter's gifts that had guided him forward. He thought back to the king's words. Treasure is not what shines in your hand, but what opens doors for generations. At last he understood. The journey back. The path down the mountains felt lighter than the climb up. The dangers of Droskar seemed quieter now, as if the world itself had acknowledged their victory. The shifting forest no longer tried to trick their steps. The river of crystal flowed calmly without roaring illusions. Even the desert winds carried only a gentle whisper. Rylan noticed the change and turned to Soraya. The trials are silent now. Was it the beast that stirred them? Soraya nodded slowly. The beast was a shadow of desire. While it lived, the land reflected its hunger. Now that it is gone, the world rests. But the trials remain, waiting for the next soul who comes with greed. Rylan frowned. So others will still come? Seekers chasing golden power? Yes, Soraya said softly. But perhaps fewer will fall. Perhaps your story will reach them before they arrive. Her words settled in his mind. Rylan had once dreamed of being remembered as the man who found the greatest treasure. Now he wondered if his true legacy might be different. Not the hoarding of riches, but the sharing of wisdom. As they traveled, Lyra's songs filled the air. Sometimes she sang softly to lift their spirits, and sometimes she hummed wordless notes that echoed like the wind itself. Her music reminded Rylan of his homeworld, of simple nights under human skies when he had dreamed of the stars but not yet chased them. It gave him peace. Elira, meanwhile, practiced as they walked. She leapt from rocks, rolled across the sand, and spun with imagined battles. Each move was sharper than the last, her eyes glowing with determination. Next time, she said with a grin, if a beast rises, I will strike even faster. Rylan laughed, shaking his head. Let's hope there is no next time. Returned to the king after many days, they reached the palace once more. The alien king waited for them in the great hall, his tall form glowing faintly under the starlit dome. His eyes studied them, calm and knowing, as though he had watched their every step. You have returned, the king said. His voice echoed like the wind across valleys. And the beast is gone. Rylan stepped forward, his heart steady. It tried to consume me with greed. I almost lost myself. But your daughters saved me. Without them, I would not stand here. The king nodded slowly. Then you have learned. Treasure is not for one hand. Treasure is for all who walk together. He raised his staff, and the hall filled with starlight. Maps of galaxies spread across the walls, the same as in the Chamber of Eternity. This is my gift to you, human. A map of paths uncharted, of stars unseen. It is not gold, but it is greater, for with it your kind may walk farther than ever before. Rylan bowed his head. I came seeking wealth, but I leave with something far greater. He looked at the daughters, then back at the king. I leave with wisdom, with friendship, and with hope. The king's eyes softened. Then you are worthy of both the map and my daughter's companionship. Where you go, they may choose to go also. The choice is theirs. Soraya bowed her head gracefully. I will walk where truth is sought. If that path is with Rylan, I will follow. Lyra smiled gently. I will go where my songs are needed. If his journey requires music, I will sing for it. Illyra grinned boldly. And I will go where there are challenges. If adventure lies ahead, I am ready. Rylan felt warmth in his chest. They were not gifts to be owned. They were companions who chose freely. That was the true honor. A new purpose. When Rylan stood once more upon the fields outside the palace, he felt the future calling him. The starship he had left behind was waiting, its silver hull gleaming under Droskar's light. But it was no longer a lonely vessel. Now he had companions to share it with. Before boarding, he looked back at the king who stood upon the palace steps. I cannot promise I will always make the right choice, but I can promise that I will remember this lesson, and I will carry your gift with care. The king raised his staff in silent blessing. Then go, human. Carry the light of new stars. The ship's engines roared and they rose into the sky. As the world of Droskar shrank beneath them, Rylan's heart swelled with something greater than pride. It was purpose, the first voyage. The daughters stood beside him on the bridge. Soraya studied the glowing star maps that now filled the ship's console. Her calm voice guided them. There, beyond the edge of known space lies a cluster of hidden worlds. That is where we should go first. Lyra's fingers moved across the controls and her song rose, blending with the hum of the engines. It felt as though the ship itself responded to her melody, gliding more smoothly through the void. Illyra stood at the viewport, her eyes wide with excitement. Look at it, she said softly. The stars are endless. Each one could hold a challenge greater than the last. Rylan smiled, placing his hand on the console. Then let's find out, together. The ship leapt forward, leaving trails of light behind. The galaxy stretched before them like an endless sea. A legacy beyond gold. As the days turned to weeks in their voyage, Rylan found himself changing. He no longer counted wealth or calculated profits. Instead, he recorded each new star they charted, each hidden world they uncovered. He listened to Soraya's guidance, to Lyra's songs, to Illyra's laughter. On one world, they found a desert planet rich with strange crystals that sang when touched. On another, they discovered forests of silver leaves that glowed softly in the night. They shared these findings with passing travelers, who carried the knowledge to distant colonies. Rylan became known, not as a treasure hunter, but as a starfinder, the human who brought maps of hope, not gold. The name spread across systems, not for greed, but for inspiration. And wherever his story was told, the lesson of Droskar followed. The true treasure one night, as the ship drifted between stars, Rylan stood at the viewport alone. The galaxy stretched endlessly before him, glittering with possibilities. He remembered the man he had once been, a wanderer chasing riches, a dreamer of crowns and thrones. He thought of the beast, of its whispers, of how close he had come to falling, and he thought of the daughters whose strength had saved him when his own failed. Soft footsteps approached. It was Lyra, her gentle smile glowing in the dim light. You are quiet tonight, she said softly. Rylan nodded. I was just thinking. I came seeking treasure, but I see now that the treasure was never gold. The treasure is here. The map, the stars, the journey, and all of you. Lyra's eyes shone with warmth. Then you have found what so many never do. He turned back to the stars, his heart steady. Yes, this is the true treasure, and I will never let it go. The ship sailed onward, carrying them to new worlds, new wonders, and new stories. And in every corner of the galaxy, where light met darkness, the tale of the human who sought treasure but found something greater lived on.